Okay, welcome, Trevor.
Hi.
We're back, Holiday Systems Inc., with another Life Before. So we have Trevor Greggs here. I'll let her introduce herself and then we'll have a conversation, get some background on her.
Yeah, thanks, Dom. Thanks everybody for tuning in. As Dom said, my name is Trevor Greggs. I am a public relations consultant and digital strategist for a global advisory firm. Yeah, very excited to be here. I'm sure I will dive into more of my background, what I do in this conversation. So, yeah.
So what exactly do you do in your role?
Yeah. So that's that's a very good question, and the reason why I say that is because I feel like it kind of varies daily. So in terms of my title, so I am a public relations consultant and digital strategist, but the overarching title would be a consultant. And so essentially what that means is I serve as a strategic advisor or strategic counsel to my clients. My clients range their Fortune 500 brands, their governmental entities, institutions of higher education, retail brands, nonprofit organizations. You name it, I've worked with them and currently work with them. But going back to my title, as I mentioned, I am a public relations consultant and digital strategist. And so what I do in my role, I know I mentioned just a second ago that I serve as this strategic advisor to my clients, but essentially the brands that I work with, or not just the brands that I work with, but all brands, I help them, navigate this super complex world that we live in. And as you know, as everybody sees, we're living in this time where so many things are popping up in the world, whether it's politically, relating to the environment and sustainability, education, equity and justice. It doesn't matter. There's so many things that are relevant to today and are relevant to brands and what they're facing and their mission and their values. And it's my job to ensure that they are putting out the right messaging to reach their stakeholders and their target audiences, that they're maintaining their brand, that they're putting out and leveraging the right tactics and strategies to ensure that they are doing what they need to do to not only stay relevant, but, ensure that they are, maintaining their brand, but also putting out, what is relevant to what's happening in today's world.
So continuing to be agile. That's what we call agile in my space.
Mm-hmm.
My company is driven by innovation and helping develop things faster. But of course, the world changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Constantly changing, constantly moving in a different direction. You have to pivot. So let's say, for example, in 2 weeks, we're working on a certain product and it's high demand for that product. Once we end that 2 weeks, we reevaluate if we need to continue pushing this product or do we need to add more to the product or go back and revise things. So I think that's similar to what you're doing inside of the company as well. We work in technology and we work in business, right? So from the top down, you have to have business decisions before you get into technology-based products or service-based products. And I like what you do. And when you reached out to me, I was like, oh yeah, this is a conversation I really want to have because you are very knowledgeable in your space, right? We all have specialties and we all have the space that we need to speak into, and then we need to promote that so others can know what those things are and how to get into those spaces. So that's what I really want to get into the conversation about today, so we can maybe motivate some people to be like you.
and just like you too.
So how did you get started? Like, how did you come across this career pathway?
Yeah. So gosh, you're gonna make me rewind all the way back to my younger years. So I remember when I was younger, probably like, oh gosh, maybe 6, 7, like very, very young. I have always been, I don't know, maybe you can tell now, but I've always been just like a girl's girl, like a girly girl. Like I was just this like this Barbie, right? And so I just knew, like, you cannot tell me that growing up, I wasn't going to be in fashion, specifically a fashion designer. Like I just knew that was my calling. And so as I got older, my parents were always strong advocates of education. Not only that, but I just also just have loved learning ever since I was younger. And as I got older, I started to think about, okay, like, would this be practical? Because I know that, you have to work to pay the bills, and I want to do something that I'm also passionate about. So, okay, I was just thinking like, okay, how can I, do something in fashion, but make it relevant to today and the concerns of today, and, something that will pay the bills. So, I actually started Googling and actually came across this thing called fashion PR. And I had never heard of public relations before. And I was just like, oh, that's interesting. It has to do with, communicating and being creative and thinking outside the box. So I started to, dive deeper into that, research it a bit more, this is probably around like high school age, early college. I started to, look into like who were some of the leaders in the industry. And not saying that I'm not passionate about fashion now, because it's still one of my favorite things. But as I started learning more about the public relations industry, I started figuring out like, oh, it doesn't just have to be fashion. There's so many different sectors and areas and industries that utilize and leverage public relations and communicating and developing different tactics for these brands and organizations to maintain their brand and reach these targeted audiences. And not only just that, but when I was younger as well, whenever I would we would have family time and I would look at TV, right? And so of course, commercials come on, and of course with commercials, a lot of these brands have different like slogans and catchphrases. So for example, like Subway, you automatically think eat fresh, right? Because that's the slogan. And so I just remember when I was younger, me and my family, we'd be watching TV and I would just be like, oh, that I feel like the slogan should have been XYZ. And they would just turn to me and they'd be like, that's clever. Like, that's kind of smart. And I don't know. I just had this thing when I was younger where I would just like, it would just pop up and it would just come. Like, I would just think of like these slogans and phrases and kind of like these like little mini campaigns in my head for these brands that weren't paying me, that did not know who I was. And that just, I don't know. It just kind of just worked. It just kind of just became my thing. And I think it just ties so well with the PR industry and strategic communications, and especially my digital expertise, because, these organizations and brands, specifically with their audiences, they're trying to keep their audiences' attention, because there's so many things that are competing in this world where their audiences are saying, okay, you only have, my short time span, you only have this amount of time with me. Like, what do I need to know? Why is this relevant to me? Why is this important to me? And so, that kind of just stemmed from there when I was younger. And I just love like the creative aspect of my industry. There's no one size fits all. There's no one approach to things, especially with all of these organizations and brands and companies. You truly get to leverage your creativity and just your out of the box thinking. And I do that on a daily basis. And I absolutely love it. I love seeing what I can come up with. I love seeing how my clients react to things. I love seeing my ideas show up in commercials. Mm-hmm. I love seeing my ideas show up in advertisements and on websites and in brand campaigns. And it's just so rewarding to me. It's just so, it's rewarding, yet it's so funny just to see how the mini version of me growing up, how, I came up with these little quick sayings and quick catchphrases and slogans, and how it's now just manifested into what I do now. So